around, but I will clarify what Mr. Hunker just alluded to, the idea that we have referred a levy here, there, everywhere. I've been on this board for 6 years. This will be my 3rd attempt. You want to talk about coordination, Mr. Meredith? You didn't coordinate with me, who's the long-serving member on this board, if your organization was at all involved in referring any of those subsequent levies. I did get personally involved in a levy proposal, not the last one, the previous one. And where I started that out was exactly where I was looking, what this board is looking to refer today. It didn't end up that way. It ended up by being something totally different. The elected officials that were on the board when we referred something in 2013, including myself, that was done by this board and had 7 different elements. It was $1.48, and if 283 people would have voted the other way, 283 people, that issue would have been solved for that duration of time. At that time, a real distinct difference was the fact that the current sheriff at that time sent a letter to the editor expressing his displeasure with the way it was organized and that he didn't know how much he was going to get. And that was done a number of weeks before the final election deadline, and there isn't anybody who is ever going to work on a campaign that says for law enforcement, if you don't have your chief law enforcement officer in support of this, it's just not going to pass. You know, there's nothing you can do. It could be the perfect proposal. And I thought that was actually a really good proposal. And so, listening to the voters, we certainly have. Do I want to work with that group? Absolutely. I don't have the time, Mr. Meredith. There is really not the time within the budget to maintain a current service level. And if I'm going to change it, this board is going to change it. I think it's a duty that I ask the voters. You got to weigh in before I make that decision. This is what it's going to look like if we don't have it. And this is what it'll look like if you do provide it. And the clarity for that elected official, the sheriff, is pretty clear. This is what we're going to be able to provide for you. The district attorney and other members of the law enforcement agencies that work with the county on that, they have the luxury of working their own department. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but the second that they want to start working on the whole picture as far as how it's fiscally provided for, the interactions and how it's appropriated, that's when they need to come to a budget committee meeting. That's when they need to run for Josephine County Commissioner. I've never gone to the DA. I've never gone to juvenile detention. I've never gone to the sheriff. I wouldn't go to the community corrections director, even though they work for us, they work for the board, and say, your priorities are all wrong. How you're doing your department needs to change dramatically, and that's just not working for me. No, that's not my job. He was elected as the DA. He was elected as the sheriff. My job is to when he needs resources, to do my utmost to provide those. That's my job. And so I have a real definitive line about where my authority and my responsibility is and where it isn't. And my authority and responsibility is to provide opportunities for solutions to the public. And yeah, there's been a majority of the people who have said they didn't support the proposals in the past, but there was a pretty good group of people that said that was really close, which you referred in 2013. And we really understand what the predicament is. Talking about having these conversations around the community, previous boards have gone out for town halls and 2 or 3 people show up at a time. This issue has been discussed for most of my lifetime. The majority of my lifetime, at 38 years old, this issue has been discussed in Josephine County. If you have an opinion about it, or you don't know the whole story, that's not my fault. It isn't. It isn't my fault. I am willing to talk to anybody who's called my office and wanted to say, what about that ISF budget and how does that work? Can you explain that to me? Let's go have coffee. I'll buy it. Don't worry about it. Let's go talk about the ISF. I think this board did something pretty creative. If this passes, policy on the books right now is if this proposal goes forward and the voters endorse it, the board is not included in the internal service fund, currently at 10%, that will be appropriated against these revenues. It's just not we're just going to take ourselves out of it. We're not going to propose, I'm not going to endorse the idea that we're going to change that system if it doesn't pass. The burden will be ever greater on funding this, whether you like it or not. It's a process. It's part of the process. You got to have a board of commissioners. Will be ever greater on the general fund, and I don't want to take general fund dollars away from law enforcement to pay for this. I'd rather have a state grant from public health who can appropriate 10% of theirs and have it paid for by that portion. Public Works, the Parks Department, the fairgrounds, all of those pay in. But if I remove the board from that, then it's just going to the general fund. And that's how it's going to be funded. So that's not a positive direction. There is a lot to discuss, and I think this board made a really good point in moving forward with that discussion with people who have great points, but we don't always see eye to eye. Mr. Hunker, Mr. Seligman, and others came. I just appreciate that they came. I can see a lot of people in that situation being like, I don't get anything out of that. I'm totally capable of coming and using my 3 minutes to make these points and get a following, have an audience. They want to be part of the solution, I think the same way that this board wants to. The previous proposals were not endorsed. I would have rewritten a couple of those other things that I didn't have control over, referring to the voters when they went out and got signatures. I want control over the direction and how this one is being crafted, because I think I've got an idea of the way the voters are receptive to a proposal. Rural patrols is a real challenge for the voters in the city to get behind when they are already paying $1.79 per thousand for patrols. They don't need the sheriff in the city limits, but everybody uses the jail. Everybody uses the juvenile detention facility. Commissioner Morgan's point about removing that from the general fund or this law enforcement by using other dollars. We do that at every point we can. There are fewer departments that are reliant on general funds than ever before. And that level that those departments that do receive it is smaller than ever before. There's a rock and a hard spot with how we're going to fund this. And before we enter into that rock and hard spot decision-making process of a budget cycle, this is it. We don't have the luxury of waiting until 2019 or 18. It's now. You will be asked again. I can almost guarantee it by the next board, this board later on, when we have to make the next set of reductions. This isn't it. If we wanted to operate within the general fund money, $4 million, and the shared receipts that comes in at 2.3, it costs more than that to keep the jail at the current level right now. That's not funding the DA. That's not funding any juvenile beds. That's not funding anything else in the county. All of that money goes straight to there. So living within your means, government, I've heard that, and I totally endorse that. You guys don't know what that feels like yet. And I don't really want to see my community go to that direction. But we will. We'll do what we can with the resources we have. We'll keep appropriating and making sure and hearing the people and saying, this is a priority, this is not a priority. If Josephine County wants that kind of government, we'll do it. We don't have any choice. We can't go into debt. We operate very fiscally solvent, and in this 6 years, we've made great strides in improving our fiscal situation. Twice improved our bond ratings. That isn't easy to do when you've cut $40 million from a budget, laid off a couple hundred people, and still looking fiscally solvent. But that's our job, and we'll continue to do it. I'm proud to serve Josephine County. I got off the couch, and the difference between my predecessor, the gentleman that I with the help of the community, removed from office, is he didn't advocate for forest management. I disagree with Mr. Dittmer, not on much, but on that point, between 1970 and 1980, Josephine County collected zero in property taxes. Few counties in their history can have that in their record. It's always been a fairly low level because we've got forest dollars. The trees are still there. The capacity to mill them, maybe not locally, but there's 1 billion board feet of capacity within the existing infrastructure in the state today. There's a market for timber with this CLT stuff that's coming online, different green technologies for building. Everything's still there. Maybe the people who know what they're doing in the woods are just fewer, but they're there. It just needs the opportunity to blossom again. And I think we've got an administration, we've got lawsuits that are going to be pushing it in that direction harder than ever before. I'm optimistic that our best days are ahead of us, that we're going to do things better, that this issue as a challenge has brought us closer together. We talked yesterday about what the Merlin area and the North Valley and Sunny Valley has had to do as a result of not being able to just pick up a phone and call law enforcement. They've had to rely on their neighbors. They've had to meet their neighbors. What a fantastic thing. There's real positives to all of this growing pains in our community. But at some point, you got to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody and they come. The whole system starts to fall apart if we don't have this basic fundamental infrastructure. And I don't want to place blame anymore. I don't want this thing to divide. Mr. Meredith's intent and that whole group's trying to better our community. That's what people with lack of character will let this issue divide them. It needs to bring us closer together. Lean into it hard all together. I would like this issue to not be passed by 2 votes, 3 votes, a 1% or less than that. I'd like everybody to kind of lean into this a whole lot more and it be definitive that this is what we want. On the average resident in Josephine County, residential assessed value is $155. We're talking about less than $12 for the median household, $12 a month for the median household in Josephine County. Commissioner Morgan talked about her T situation. It's all relative. Everybody's income levels are different. I understand that there was a religious organization that raised $3.5 million in weeks shorter than their goal to build a new facility. I don't believe this community is poor. I believe there are people here that are not financially well-to-do, but there are people with a capacity to pay. I don't own a piece of property. I haven't found myself in a permanent situation to buy. Maybe people who have bought properties, this sounds terrible. It sounds like the moving comment. It's not pleasant to hear, but I'm not going to mince words anymore. I'm here 2 years longer than I wanted to be to solve this issue. I got other things I want to do with my life. This situation is tough. At some point, we all need to come together and figure out how to move forward. And I've used way more time than I wanted to. Commissioner DeYoung's been patient, and so is Commissioner Morgan. I apologize.
Yeah, I'd like to just give you some examples. I live here in Grants Pass, Oregon. Wonderful public safety. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better police station for public safety in Grants Pass. Last year, my pickup was stolen in broad daylight, and it was gone. They found it in up at 2 o'clock in the morning. The Douglas County Sheriff ran the kid off the road up in at the rest area north of Sutherland. So I went and got my truck back. Lucky, I'm one of the lucky ones. So that was in Grants Pass, broad daylight, not the county. Sir, I understand what you're saying. I'm out at Ballinger Industrial Park, and the other night, before I could go home, I had to run people that were going through environmental landscapes trucks. They dropped the kid off. The truck drove away. I went over and confronted him. He said, well, I'm looking for Chevelle. I said, yeah, same old story I hear every time. They just look around and see what they're looking for, and then I'm going to get the pack of lies. So anyway, I called public safety. I ran him off the property. He went down to the depot and got the slip. When the cop was turning around, he jumped in a car and took off. So he was there as a fix. I can't imagine what you see at 3 o'clock in the morning. And before I could get out of the parking lot after that one, I had another guy. Exact same thing. This was 7 o'clock at night inside Grants Pass. I can't imagine what's going on out in the county. I'm not going to get in the way of anything that will help the county and the county residents. I can't do it. And if it means putting it off, Jay, you and I have known each other a long time. But you know what? We put this little meeting together yesterday. It was an ad hoc thing for what? A week ago we started it. We called it a law enforcement summit. We brought 6 people in to sit around the table. It was standing room only in the room because we had all of a sudden, we had all this enthusiasm about public safety. Where in the heck have you people been all along? I know you've done a lot of good work with SOS. I was involved with cuffs 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I paid my money. I wrote donation checks. I did it all. I didn't do potluck dinners and art auctions, but by golly, I participated. Where did that go? Nowhere. I've been at this now for 7 years on the city side over here, and now I'm in the county. I got the same darn problem that I had 7 years ago. Fighting the public for money. Trying to justify what the police level should be and what levels of protection is. You know what my worst nightmare is? That you, the people, are going to lead, you're going to think this is normal. You've almost given up on your own darn self, for Pete's sake. I'm broke. I don't have any money. You know, I was behind a guy in the bank the other day, had a plastic bag with $500,000 in cash in it. You think he declared all that? No, he's in that percentage that says, I'm busted. I don't have any money. It's declared money. There's plenty of money in this valley, but a lot of it doesn't get declared because of some of the industries we're in. But I'm talking, when I came back, going back to my pickup, when I went to Sheriff Daniels and I said, could you look this guy up? He said, yeah. 2015, you know how many times that guy had been arrested, for stealing cars 6 times in 2015. But you know why he didn't stay in our jail? No room at the inn. No room at the inn. When our sheriff says he needs 185 beds, you know, darn it, I believe him. Because if he has 150 or 160 like he has now, he's still letting people go. There is a need for 185. He has to staff to 185. If he only staffs to 160, he can't put 185 in there. So there's an awful lot of nuances that come in. And I'm personally standing here in front of you. It's one of the reasons I'm in, so in fact, that was my pickup. Brand new truck. I bought that truck the day before I went in for open heart surgery. Couldn't drive it for 2 months. And this dirty SOB took it because he thought it was his. You know where he was going? Hood River to show his mom and dad his brand new truck. He's in jail. Douglas County put him in jail because they had the resources. The sheriff told me, I said, "You're going to let this kid go?" He goes, "You're in Douglas County, Mr. DeYoung. We aren't letting anybody go. Next time he's in a motorized vehicle, he's headed north in a bus with bars in the windows." And that's what they did. You know why? Because their community got behind their sheriff and their government. And I'm going to drop it right there because I'm getting
Fired up.
emotional. Thank you.
Mr. Morgan.
I have a hard time being accused of not collaborating. I've spent my life doing public service or serving our community in volunteerism. One year, and I remember getting an evaluation at the Department of City Police that I got needs improvement in community involvement, and that year alone I had contributed 1,200 hours of volunteer hours as a Josephine County Sheriff's Reserve. But I got marked as needs improvement. Everybody's perspective on where I should serve or not serve, that's different. They didn't like how I was serving, so they said I wasn't. 1,200 volunteer hours, one person. Okay? In 2012, when the first big levy failed, but it passed in the city, I spearheaded an effort or championed the cause that we take money out of the city coffers to rent jail beds. And the private organization, the former city councilors, other people in the community that are well-to-do are the ones that said, "You're building a bridge to nowhere. Don't waste your time renting jail beds." I thought it was the right thing to do because I also have worked as a parole officer who gets the calls in the middle of the night from the police department arresting people on parole and probation saying, "This is what they're doing." And I say, "Take them to jail for violation of their parole or probation." And the jail said, "Sorry, we won't take them." And the amount of work I saw the other officers doing and the despair that I saw in the city police officers from doing all this work to arrest somebody, to do the report, to have the district attorney's office say, "We're not going to prosecute because we're beyond available resources," and the jail refused to lodge. And that caused a mass exodus of good officers from our community that moved away. We lost district attorneys, we lost police officers, and I felt incapable of doing my job appropriately because everybody knew, what are you going to do? You're going to give me some more work crew? So I've seen what it's like without a jail or the ability to do it. But more importantly, I've seen what it's like when we rented the 30 jail beds and saw what it did to have the jail. And all of a sudden, in 6 months, they were able to decrease arrests by 500. It actually had a numeric response that you can put a statistic to say it's a success and it has a purpose. People were held pre-trial. People were held on warrants and shipped out. People were held to consequence in the community. So when people say why this or why that, we have proof that having a jail has an impact on the safety of our community. So as far as OSP, the DA, the city police, I had a conversation with the DA. I'm his liaison. And I asked him, what are your goals for this year? And he said, I have one goal, to keep current service levels and prosecute every legitimate case that's referred to my office. That's a mandate to me from another elected official to make sure he has funding. This will allow him to have funding because we're taking a portion of the public safety fund and we're funding it, the jail and the juvenile detention. That means there's more money from the shared receipts and the 58 cents base tax to fund patrol and district attorney. So if you say I didn't coordinate on how to budget, he told me what his goal was. It's my job to find the revenues or to see what other opportunities there are. City police, I've heard from city police as far as what they don't like not having a jail, and the private organization. I say keep working, keep going towards what you're doing. SOS has accomplished some pretty neat things. The Grants Pass Treatment Center, people are going to question whether that's a good thing. But I can tell you that people don't get off of heroin without assistance to do that. And heroin is wreaking havoc on our community right now. And instead of spending more money to ship people to Medford, we actually brought in an organization that cares about the patients, not their profits. And they're going to help people titrate down and get off of this stuff that is ruining our community right now. You know, we are required to do assessments on people on parole or probation to determine their level of need and their risk to reoffend. And in that process, you talk about how old they were when they started committing crimes, how old they were when they first used drugs. And more often than not, it was 10 to 12 years old. If we do not invest in our youth, in getting, I'm not looking at wanting to lock up all our youth, but sometimes they have to be protected from an environment, removed from the situation so we can get the evidence-based stuff around them to help them so they don't continue in the criminal life when they get older. How are we going to get kids through high school if they're already addicted in junior high? To me, there is no greater cause than to protect our kids and give them a future. I intend to continue to have community meetings. That was my promise on the campaign trail, and I will keep that promise, that I will continue to be out in the community asking us to work together and collaborate. This is not something that we alone can solve. We have to continue to have those meetings. We have to continue to ask the tough questions of what you can do. I love the idea of having one in each precinct. I've had people contact me already, say, I want to host a meeting at my house. I'll invite friends, come talk to us about what's going on. I intend to do that because this is part of living in a community. I have heard from people before that said, you're building a bridge to nowhere. I'm trying to build one bridge. That's why it's 5 years, because we believe we can be done with the litigation and start to see a change. We think we're going to have a positive outcome in the litigation, because why would you litigate if you think you're going to lose? We think we have a valid case. That's why we're in those lawsuits. And if we prevail and there's a change, it's going to take about 5 years before we see the outcome of that money, that it has a difference. I'm not looking to have levy after levy after levy. I'm looking at one bridge that will get us to where we have stable funding. That's why 5 years makes sense to me. One other department that I'm a liaison for is mental health. It's not a county department anymore, because you'll remember that 13 years ago they were privatized. Or is it, no, 12 years ago, 2005. I was reminded that that lawsuit or that challenge cost the county $3 million, and we have $4 million in the reserve. So if we lose another lawsuit, how do we pay for that? That's not the issue. The fact is that mental health said this week, and you see it in the paper, that they're closing down Hugo Hills because they can't get response when things are happening. And amazing to me is the director of options had a lot of emotion and passion in her voice when she was telling us that she had to do this because she knows she has to lay off employees, but more so that the need is so great right now. With the changes in the state system with the mental health hospital statewide, there's people with more acute illness being in our community than the state used to take at the state hospital. That burden is coming back to us locally. And Hugo Hills has more acute patients in it right now. And because of that, sometimes in somebody's illness, they lash out violently. And the staff are not equipped to deal with somebody that's being violent or throwing furniture and breaking windows and attacking other people. So when their response time is not, because the other day they had one where after 4 hours there was no response, how do they keep the patients they're charged with safe? How do they keep the other patients safe from that person that's in a crisis? How do they keep their staff safe? And so we're losing a necessary facility in our community that was handling some of our most ill people because of law enforcement. That's sad to me. I understand it's hard, but I have no intention to stop collaborating. I intend to continue to collaborate with everybody in this room, every community that we have, any neighborhood that will have me, any home that will have me, I will continue to talk and listen and see what we can do, because this isn't going to fix everything. This is one piece of the pie, and we have to keep working on getting our kids through school, having a career for them to live on here. Let's have jobs here, not just raise our kids so they move away. We need a plan, and that's part of it. This is one piece of a bigger strategic plan. And I'm grateful. I'm excited. I grew up with people around here that are getting into jobs of excitement. I am looking forward to being a part of the time that we change the course of Josephine County, where we see hope and we see a future where this is as beautiful in our economics as it is in our people and our natural environment around us. We have the best place to live, and I'm excited that I get to be a part of seeing that change, where we are no longer focusing on how poor we are, but we're focusing on how great we are and what we're going to accomplish. I love this place. I'm not going to stop. There's some in this room that have seen me since I was a little kid. They know I've come a long way. Thank you all for being a part of that path, and I continue to want to improve not only myself, but the community I live in, so that it continues to be better for generations to come. So
So we have some administration